And to continue our conversation about Lane Kiffin, want to welcome in a good friend of the show, Mike Ceide, joining us from Memphis. Mike, good to see you, man. It's been a minute. It was funny because our mutual friend Chris Priest just texted me about you the other day, and it's good to see you, man. Live and in color. Welcome to Southeast Sports Plus.
I know. Over the past few months, I've seen a lot of Simone with everything you did during the basketball tournament for next door. So love that. But great to be on the show. I was with Gerhard and Patrick last week. Yep. And by the way, guys, I told you if Memphis could run the football and force turnover, they pull the upset, and they did. Crazy game at the Sim in Memphis. But we're here to talk about Lane Kiffin and the big one in the Vaught tomorrow or Saturday.
Yeah, no doubt. But you're not wrong. I mean, right now that conference there with what's going on there with Memphis, that entire American Conference is unbelievably talented. A really good possibility that one of those teams will be there in the college football playoff. Mike, before we really dive into this Ole Miss game and talk about this LSU game, I want to chat about Lane Kiffin and this documentary. You mentioned that you had a chance to watch it. It had been overnight, or at least in the last 20 hours because it just got released. What are your initial takeaways just from what you were able to see from his entire career, and then of course now covering him at Ole Miss? What are your first thoughts?
I think you applaud a guy who at first wanted to do things his way and was adamant about that, and now has learned over the last few years that he needed to change and he needed to get the things around him outside of football in balance with everything else. One of the great things, and it was only like the last 10 or 12 minutes of the show, was how well he's become a dad now, and the thing that he wasn't able to do in trying to build up those ranks. Because let's remember, he was so young. Every stop that he made, really. I mean, you're talking about the Raider job, train wreck. You talk about then going to Tennessee and USC and Alabama and FAU. All the stops along the way, he really couldn't be a dad. I'm really impressed with what Lane has done, taking care of himself now and realizing that the periphery matters. Yep. It's not just wins and losses. And I think that's why he's got Ole Miss on this trajectory of look out. Last year they were supposed to be a playoff team. This year they're not. But here they are 4-0. LSU comes to town. You beat them. The Mateer injury in the Oklahoma game a few weeks from now. Look out for Ole Miss in that playoff. This was supposed to be a rebuilding year.
It also shed some light to me on just how college football has changed. Not just Lane Kiffin changing, but the fact that he was at USC with recruiting violations and 30 less scholarships because of things that would be just it's a Tuesday today. Reggie Bush asked for money for his guys.
No
it's just so normal. Did you end up watching it in the viewpoint of knowing and watching football for as long as you have and as long as I have, just how much not only this coach has changed, but also the coach and the game that he is coaching has actually changed as well?
Yeah, it's crazy, Gerhard, because right now, all the things that USC and Reggie Bush lost his Heisman for, all of those things, as you said, are now it's, okay, how much? What do you want to do?
Yeah. No
You're leaving it. All of those things are silly to us now, but back then, but how about the fact that they told Kiffin when he returned to USC, oh, it's going to be a little slap on the wrist. And then all of a sudden he's hit with all those sanctions and still won games. But, the funny comments that Lane only does, like when he took the Tennessee job, we're going to beat Florida. Look what Urban Meyer's doing when he's calling my recruit on campus. And then, of course, the tarmac line. Yeah. He took the job. I mean, Lane, one thing that Lane Kiffin hasn't changed from the first time I covered him when he took the Tennessee job to now is he's still great with the media. He has the zingers and the one-liners. As a matter of fact, this week he talks about, hey, you know what? LSU's defense is great because they're getting what they bought out of the portal with the defense it's playing. And so all these little jabs, Lane Kiffin.
ROI is what Gerhard would call that.
Yep.
What was that? I'm sorry?
ROI is what Gerhard would call that.
Exactly. But that's the one thing. A lot of times you got guys that don't want to say too much of anything. I mean, Gerhard, Patrick, we talked about Ryan Silverfield's little jab at Kirby Smart last week when we were on. Those coaches that give you those kind of things, and for Lane, it's pretty much every press conference. He'll give you something that we can really sink our teeth to. So that's the one thing about Lane that he hasn't changed, and in what he does with the media, and kind of he really doesn't care who he's taking little pot shots at along the way. But it was really well done for 60 minutes, and the fact that Lane gave him that opportunity to do that, because let's forget the other Netflix special that they went around the SEC. Kiffin was one of those coaches that said, I don't want to have anything to do with that one. I want my guys focused on preparing for the season. And yet he allowed that in-depth 60-minute piece. I thought it was well done.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I want to talk about that. Speaking of press conferences, the press conference that took place in Knoxville when he had a son named Knox, by the way, which. Mike, what do you remember about that? Gerhard, what do you remember about that in current day? At the time, I was, in Northwest Ohio, not paying attention to the SEC and not caring. So my remembrance of what Lane Kiffin was at Tennessee was covering Alabama when he was back and just being back in the SEC, what that looks like. So I've only really had it on the after the fact part. But when you think about what those days, then you watch what was taking place outside that office when he held his own press conference and with the most bizarre, but honestly, from a TV perspective, I would not be able to quit recording. I mean, that's incredible. What are your thoughts watching that back? What were your thoughts in real time?
I'll go first here, Mike. I think one of the biggest things, because I was watching it as a sports fan at the time, and as a fan, you just thought, Lane Kiffin taking the USC job, of course.
Yeah, it's natural.
Of course. And so I don't know if you were there at the press conference there, Mike, but at the time, looking back on it, I do remember the students rioting, but I don't remember the press conference really being that weird because I was like, okay, of course he's going to take that job.
Yeah.
But then he says afterwards, obviously, the reason why you go through what you go through to go to the new job and then go back and thank Tennessee, that's the way to do it. But Mike, you might be able to shed more light there on that.
Well, obviously, being in Memphis, we covered Tennessee very well. I remember that night a little bit. I'm so much older, so I forget things. But I remember when he called that press conference, and you're talking about, 8:30, 8:45 Eastern time. So you're talking about 7:30, and we're almost done with what we're going to do that night. And all of a sudden, what? Kiffin's going to throw a press conference in Knoxville? I thought we were going to hear from him at Southern Cal tomorrow or the next day. So I think they hit on it right. You just never see it. And obviously, you haven't seen it much since.
No.
The guy who's
not regular
tries to sneak out the door and say sorry, the fact he wasn't able to tell his players, I know coaches try to do that, but after they do that, they jet set and they say everything right the next day. So what I remember most is it wasn't that long, not a lot of questions, and then the aftermath of a fan base that was excited about what he was building, and then all of a sudden there's just that it's cut off. Mm-hmm. Now, if we play retrospect and we back up and we think for a second and say, hey, okay, if you don't take the USC job, where are we now with Tennessee and what he's done? Obviously, joining Nick Saban in Alabama really changed his trajectory to where it is now. But you kind of got to think about things because while he did well for a couple of years at USC, it never panned out the way it was supposed to. And you just wonder, had he used those couple of years, those 3 years on Rocky Top, how everything might have been different. Yes. But I think it's supposed to be what it is today, learning lessons along the way, learning from the very best in Nick Saban, going to FAU and having to rebuild your mantra and what you're all about. And then Ole Miss going, we're not very good. Let's go for the name, who I think can really change things. And here we are, lo and behold, he's really done well in Oxford and does not want to leave, as we saw, last year when Auburn came calling, and we saw how close it was. Had it not been for his daughter, maybe he is the Auburn Tigers coach.
Honestly, no doubt. I'm sure that Auburn fans are probably watching that and thinking, like, this is what they could have been, or this is what it would have been. And, everyone replays the tape on that. I think the one thing that is very, very notable, and you see it in that picture right there, is his need for his dad at these stops, and then his willingness for his dad to say, I'm going to take my career and I'm going to put it aside because I watched my son fail. I mean, again, is he sitting here and saying this? No, I don't want to put words in Monty Kiffin's mouth. And obviously, rest in peace. This is a guy who's had unbelievable success, incredibly well respected at every level of football. But he said, I'm not going to watch my son fail. And if he's going to fail, I'm going to be right there with him, and I'm going to be the one that's fighting in the battles with him. I'm not going to stand on the sidelines or on a different sideline, literally, and watch him, not do well. And he chose, he said no to several jobs, chose to go be an assistant college football coach with his son at several different stops. And I think that it speaks to not only the type of man Monty Kiffin was, the type of dad that he was, but also the type of young man that Lane Kiffin was in that he really wasn't ready for that level, and he needed his dad to be there on the sideline for him. And then of course, what happened at USC. I mean, I teared up watching that part where they discussed, his dad telling him, I'm going to step down. I know that you need to fire your defensive coordinator. I mean, that was hard to watch a little bit, man. I mean, I'm a coach's wife, so I get particularly sensitive about stuff, and I'm a new mom too. Is check every box when it comes to just like let the waterworks happen. But I was like, that's hard. I mean, Mike, that was hard.
It was, but one of the things as a dad, and my kids are like y'all's age right now. They're in their upper 20s, and so I would do anything for them.
Yeah.
And I haven't done other jobs all because I wanted to be an everyday dad. And I think when Lane at his age got the opportunity with the Raiders, and you guys talked about it in the previous segment, and his dad said, I don't think this is right. And as any 31-year-old would do, mine does it to this day. Dad, I got this. I know. And that didn't work out. I think Lane realized, look, if I can have my dad with me, I'm still going to be the boss, but I have somebody that I can lean on both on and off the field, and he's going to know more about football than I ever know.
Yeah.
And to have that, and then to have a Super Bowl winning defensive coordinator who has seen everything, including college football, say, you know what? I'm going to go help my son. And I venture to guess that most dads, I would, if my son needed me and I could do it. Yeah, man, I'll be there for you for your leaning post.
Yeah.
And not forget, he's a pretty good defensive coordinator. So it wasn't like Lane was hiring me to be the defensive coordinator. His dad knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
But you're right. But as the head coach, when you're given that ultimatum of, look, dad or you, that's something I would hope my son would never want to have to decide. And Lane was put in that situation. But I think with the way things turned out, with Monty passing away a few years ago, Lane mentioned it. They were able to spend that time together. And even when he was a child, Monty always made him a part. You're talking about an NFL head, coordinator, and Lane was always there. His dad always made his son a big part of his life, and that was the reason why he made the decision. I'm going to go help my son. Yeah. I've done everything else. So
and
it was great to see.
And I think that because of who Monty Kiffin was, that there were coaches, i.e. Nick Saban, who Lane Kiffin to that point might not have done much, but I mean, no, make no mistake, Nick Saban is the type of guy who's given several guys a second opportunity. But I think that there are coaches who will say, okay, like I'm gonna make sure you're taken care of, right? And because of my relationship with your dad, or because of my respect for your dad. And I think that there's nothing wrong with that, in my opinion. I think that's a great thing. You work every day as a parent, right, to help build a legacy, not for yourself, but for your children. And for him to be able to kind of reap the benefit, so to speak, in a positive way. Because at first he reaped the benefit in a negative way. He got thrust into a spotlight he wasn't ready for. A lot of it probably because of who his last name was, right? Going to the Raiders and then getting these opportunities. He just wasn't emotionally, experience-wise, ready for it to go do. I think that to have a little bit of a payback in terms of like, okay, Nick Saban comes in, kind of revitalizes his career. He gets an opportunity again. I just think that like that's the type of legacy. That's what you hope to kind of hand over to your children someday.
Yeah, and I think the coaching profession has always been really interesting. I can't help but draw the parallels to what we're just seeing at Auburn with Stephen Pearl and Bruce Pearl, and what we saw in North Carolina and the New England Patriots with Bill Belichick and Steve Belichick, where you typically see son work for dad, and to see it the other way around, I thought that was just kind of just amazing in and of itself. Yep. But as you mentioned, sometimes it gives you it puts you on a platform that you're not necessarily ready for, but to have that helping hand there. And we talked about the parallels throughout this documentary. Patrick beautifully mentioned the parallel of yoga and being put in uncomfortable positions.
Yes.
The other parallel was, hey, I want to be there for my kids like my dad was there for me. I just thought that was really awesome. And Mike, I think that that family dynamic, especially in sports, is almost really unique that you don't see in almost any other profession, entertainment or anything else, where in sports it runs a nice cool through line where it brings families together.
The other thing, though, is remember a lot of times that family name will get you through the door. Like Pete Carroll said, I'm going to give Lane Kiffin this opportunity because I know his dad. But look, all of us know there's more horror stories of those guys who don't make it because of their family name. And think about what happened to Lane, the train wreck in Oakland, then he goes to Tennessee and makes that decision. Now you got another fan. That could have easily spiraled out of control, and we'd be talking about Lane Kiffin at FAU or App State right now. But all of those learning lessons, and oh, by the way, somebody to talk to like Monty Kiffin to kind of look, keep it focused. You know what you're doing. And then you heard Nick Saban say, he was the right hire for me. Yes, I love Monty, but I wanted to change my offense. And the guy to do that was Lane Kiffin. So dad's name, his family name might have got him in the door, but Lane did the work. and then became an offensive guru to the point where the best college coach ever decided, yeah, I want him to revamp my offense. And then he took that experience, took his licks at FAU, and is now one of the top coaches, not in the SEC, and in the country. And when every job opens and you're a Rebel fan, you're like, you keep your fingers crossed that, look, let's let him stay here.
No doubt.
You told us in the documentary, Lane, you love Oxford, so let's sign that lifetime contract, like Rick Barnes did at Tennessee.
Well, listen, if people didn't love Landry Kiffin in Oxford before now, obviously the hard launch with her boyfriend this week might have been a little tongue-in-cheek, like, ugh, all right, but they better love him now, because he straight up said, this is a big reason that I'm still here. This is a big reason why I'm riding through this. And it's no doubt it's worked out a lot of successful seasons. And what they're now hoping for is take the next step into being the college football playoff. That begins with a huge opportunity this weekend. Mike, Ceide, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, guys, we're going to break down this huge matchup in Oxford between LSU and Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin's role in that, what things have looked like offensively with a wild quarterback set up over there, no doubt, for the Rebels. We'll break all of that down here in just 2.5 minutes. Stay with us. Welcome back, guys. Southeast Sports Plus, as we continue our conversation with Mike Ceide, joining us from Memphis. Great conversation, obviously, about Lane Kiffin, the documentary that just came out from ESPN. And what a week for it to come out, which I'm sure was done by design, as LSU and Ole Miss will face off in a battle that is sure to have some playoff implications, certainly some SEC title implications, with two undefeated teams trending in the right direction. Mike, you look at this matchup, you look at the opportunity that Ole Miss has here, and you don't think it's too far off from the opportunity and really the game they did have in hand just a year ago.
Right. You know, we just talked about it. Everyone will look back at Kentucky and Florida last year and say, oh, those are the two games that cost Ole Miss a chance to play in the playoff. Well, let's not forget that they went down to Death Valley at night and were pretty much handling LSU and had it done. And then all of a sudden, fourth quarter woes and the Tiger Magic happened and LSU wins that football game. Not a bad loss, obviously, to a good LSU team, but it wound up to be another one of those marquee wins that you didn't have, that maybe the committee would have said, okay, look, they lost those two, but here's another team that they beat along the way. So that's another game that's Rebels are going to be thinking about it. I know there's a lot of new players. Every team has a lot of new players. But this is also an LSU team that's won 7 of the last 9 meetings between these two teams.
Yep.
The last 2 have been close, but the Tigers have had the Rebels number. And I think that's not something that's lost on Lane Kiffin. But now you go into the big question mark of, who's going to be playing at quarterback on Saturday afternoon down at the Vaught.
Yeah, speaking of quarterbacks, one thing they always do in the NFL is if you don't know between two teams, which one you think will win, say both quarterbacks' names out loud and just go with the guy you trust with. That in mind is starting to do a little bit more with the SEC. Yeah, honestly, yes, a little bit. But with these two quarterbacks, now that Trinidad Chambliss is the guy at Ole Miss and Garrett Nussmeier, who came in as the Heisman Trophy, one of the Heisman Trophy favorites coming into the season, what are some of the things that you think that both these guys will have to execute in order to get their teams over the hump, given how strong LSU's defense is right now and where Ole Miss is defensively?
Well, Gerhard, let me start with, you mentioned the LSU defense, and take nothing away from that. I mean, they've been playing well under 10 points a game. They're one of the best in the country. But does that Clemson and Florida win really look all that impressive right now? And
so
5 interceptions, you take away the pick 6. Florida's not very good. I'm a Florida grad, and I was hanging myself during that game because Nussmeier, from what you saw the last couple of years, that offense has kind of been running in the mud a little bit. I know they're trying to fill out for the 5 offensive linemen at LSU, but Nussmeier, as you mentioned, came in as a Heisman hopeful. But a lot like Klubnik at Clemson and Lagway at Florida, all of that is kind of washing away. But, a big game for Nussmeier, and he's right back in it. And when you talk about the quarterback situation at Ole Miss, it's every week we seem to get the wrong guy. We're hearing that last Monday before the game against Tulane, Lane was saying, Austin's good, and then he didn't play. And then all week this week it's been Austin's not good, he's not going to play. And I don't think he's going to, but we really don't know. But what I do like about this young man, Trinidad Chambliss, is he doesn't have to do anything differently. Just do what you've been doing the last 2 games. I really can't remember a true or a guy that came out of Division II or a new player coming in and the bright lights of the best conference in the country have done nothing to him. And again, his first start was against Arkansas. I understand that defense is not very good, but a Tulane team that was coming in riding high, and he had no trouble with either one of those. And when you're talking about which quarterback would I take, maybe I'm going to take the guy that doesn't know he's supposed to be playing this well instead of the guy who came in with all the hype and has not been playing as well as he maybe should be playing. Yeah. But this is a very good LSU team, and we're going to learn a lot about Nussmeier. We're going to learn a lot about that defense isn't legit. But we're going to learn about Trinidad Chambliss, and can he do it 3 games in a row? Because do you want to be Lane Kiffin if he has another great game and then all of a sudden your starter is healthy and you got to go, okay, which one am I going to play? I remember a guy named Tom Brady that was on the bench. Drew Bledsoe gets hurt. Bledsoe never gets his job back. Yeah. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen here, but it's a good problem to have 2 good quarterbacks. And let's not forget that Austin Simmons, he threw 4 first-quarter interceptions in the first 2 games of the season. He was able to rally the teams to win. He's a very talented player, but you got to believe he's looking over his shoulder and telling the trainers, get me back on the field. That guy's just playing a little too well. Yeah,
no question. So many talking points when it comes to the quarterback spot. And like you mentioned a minute ago, this defense will certainly be tested. There's no question about that when it comes to what Garrett Nussmeier has already proven on the big stage and continues to there in Baton Rouge. Let's take a listen to Lane Kiffin this week talking about the quarterback that will be coming up north to Oxford.
No, I think there's difference. And obviously not the quarterback runs like that. But Nussmeier does a great job of getting out of trouble and really quick feet and moving around. And he saved the game last year. Perkins has him to go to 4th and 24 or something, and he gets out of that. That probably would have ended the game. So he did a phenomenal job saving that game last year, and really great savvy player.
So right now on the season, Garrett Nussmeier, obviously, there's a reason that his name was in the headlines in the preseason, obviously continuing the headlines. I will say there's been a lot of guys whose names were there in the preseason, and then they're no longer there right now in week 5 of the season. So I feel like if you are doing what you're expected to be doing, or we're expected to be doing, I feel like this is a good thing, because in current college football day and age, Mike, man, we are seeing so much parity, and we're seeing teams maybe not playing up to what the expectation was or playing up to par for what that program has been able to do. LSU certainly trying to be on the turnaround there under Brian Kelly in year 5. Right now, completing passes at nearly 70% clip. This is a guy who has done just about everything right there for the Tigers. What is your take on how this matchup is going to look for Ole Miss, what they've been able to do off defensively, and are they up for the task here?
I think they are. And the reason I say is because one guy we're not mentioning right now, let's talk about Nussmeier. Yeah, he's done everything you've asked of him to do. But going into the season, I think LSU fans, people around the country expected to see a little bit more. And maybe it's not his fault. Like I mentioned, the changes on the offensive line, and they're not in sync just yet and haven't had to be in this 4-0 start. But, you know, a pocket passer, pro-style quarterback that can get the ball down the field. And let's not forget, he's got a ton of weapons around him. So if they do get in sync, it's going to be a situation where that Ole Miss defense is going to be tested. A lot of transfers on that Ole Miss defense. They've got to get after the quarterback, make Nussmeier move around a little bit and do things he doesn't like to do. But you've heard throughout the year, the LSU coaches have said, look, run the football, tuck it, get 6, get 8, instead of trying to stay there and throw it 30. You know, the difference between 2nd and 4 and 2nd and 14 is a big difference. So that's one thing I've seen him do a little bit more this year. But I do believe that the Ole Miss defense knows that it had struggles against Kentucky, and they really and Arkansas for that matter against Taylor Green, but they really shut it down last week against Tulane. Again, Tulane was flying in there, and I did not expect it. I did not expect to see that Green Wave team come in there, and their only touchdown came late in the fourth quarter. Brett Plath got benched because he didn't complete a pass until like the last pass of the first half. I think that's a great springboard into a game against LSU that everybody has circled. And if Ole Miss is going to get to where it wants to be, this is the one that makes believers out of people around the country. It's not Kentucky. It's not Arkansas. It's not the 4-0 start. We've been here before. You've got to beat a name program, and you have a top 5 team coming into your building where you're 30-3 over the last 33 games. This is the kind of game that, you know, I'm sure Lane Kiffin has put a few asterisks next to it a little bit more, because this is a prove-it game.
Yes.
We're going to find out what this Ole Miss team is all about. And I think one thing to focus on Saturday that we haven't talked about is Kawan Lacey, the kid from Missouri. You know, he leads the SEC with 7 touchdowns. The one thing Ole Miss could not do last year, and it cost them a chance at the playoff, was run the football when they had to. Well, Lacey showed you against Kentucky that when they had to run the football, they just give him the ball. One of the top backs, the transfer from Mizzou, 7 touchdowns, take a little pressure off the Ferris State product that's playing at quarterback. Keep an eye on that number 5 in the Ole Miss backfield, because if he can get going against this vaunted LSU front 7, I think that allows you to do a lot of different things with a young quarterback and keep him in rhythm like he's shown the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, well, you actually hit on my point there, because we were talking about Lane Kiffin at the very beginning of this, and one of the things that he has done so well is develop quarterbacks. We're about to see Jackson Dart start in the NFL largely because of what Lane Kiffin did with him at Ole Miss. With having a young quarterback in such a big game and such a strong running game, do you expect to see Lane Kiffin play a little bit more conservatively and try to run it a little bit more with Lacey, or open the thing up because they are at home, they do have that crowd backing? How do you expect to see from a game flow perspective from such a mind as wise as his is?
If it was me, I'd do exactly what you said and ride the running game. That's not Kiffin. I don't believe he's going to change anything. What he is what he is. And now, I think a few weeks ago, he's scratching his head going, what am I going to get from this guy? Now he knows what he's gotten from this guy. He has not thrown an interception. So Trinidad has been given an opportunity, and he has taken advantage of it. And I think what that does is it tells your coach, trust me. And I think Lane's going to trust him. But what the difference is what we've seen in the last few weeks. If Ole Miss can get a lead, if Ole Miss especially can get a 2-score lead, then they're going to try to grind up that clock and say, Lacey, take us home. But again, much more difficult to do against an LSU team. I think the points are going to be at a premium. I think that, I don't think either team's going to get really away from one another. So Trinidad Chambliss is going to have to make plays, and that Ole Miss defense is going to have to make that one stop. Because one of the things about Nussmeier, he doesn't make very many mistakes. So you're going to have to make that one stop. If it's a 4th down stop, if it's a turnover, if it's a pick, if it's a fourth, on downs. There's going to come a time in that game where the Ole Miss defense is going to have to make a play against one of the elite quarterbacks in the SEC and an offense that you don't want to see flip the switch when they're playing against you. But again, I am all in on Trinidad Chambliss until he shows me that he's a guy that was, winning the Division II Heisman and was leading them to a couple of Division II national. It's a Division II Ferris State guy that none of us were talking about at the beginning of the season. It was all Austin Simmons. The kid has just taken the opportunity and run with it. So I'm going to ride with him until he shows me that he's not up for the big moments, and he hasn't showed me that so far.
Lane Kiffin said take the over. Point to the premium mic. I don't know. All I know is that Lane Kiffin, he put that on record on Twitter.
Have you ever heard Lane Kiffin not think that the score was going to be 52-51? Now, again, a couple of years ago, it was 49-46 or somewhere in that where a knockaway in Oxford allowed the Rebels to get out with a win.
Yeah.
I think you have to talk defense with a team with an offense that's not maybe doing what it's supposed to or up to its level with LSU and a dominant defense and an Ole Miss team that's still riding a young man that really hasn't played in the bright lights of Division I. That defense is going to have to make plays. But am I going to be surprised if it's 47-46 in double overtime? Absolutely not, because it's Lane Kiffin.
All bets are off, man. It's college football. It's the SEC. It's you name it. It's Oxford. I mean, we've seen wild things. We've seen wild things happen there.
And let's not forget, we've talked about Lane Kiffin all through this, but Brian Kelly, he still needs one of those signature wins.
Mm-hmm. Clemson wasn't
every
it.
year. It seemed you have.
Clemson was not it, Mike.
Yeah. What?
We thought Clemson was it, and Clemson was not it.
Yeah, that wasn't it, and obviously Florida wasn't it. He'll get his opportunities, but maybe this is the year that Brian Kelly proves that he can take a team with the talent and make the playoff and make some noise. But if that is this team, you should go into Oxford and beat Ole Miss. And as you heard me before, I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's going to be an LSU letdown because the young man from Ferris State is going to lead the to another win.
Mike says, give me some Chambliss, guys. Put some money on it. I am putting money on this. Speaking of which, right now, Ole Miss is a 1.5-point favorite. This is such. I talk to you all the time about lines, and I really never know what you're talking about, honestly. But what does this line tell you? Because where am I putting my money? What am I deciding here?
Well, keep in mind this line has crossed the zero. This line opened with LSU as the favorite. And it crossed the zero, and now Ole Miss is a slight favorite. So they're saying, hey, Chambliss, they believe Chambliss is the guy now that they know who it is. The money, at least early on in this week, it might, now the public might flip it back the other way when the money comes in on tomorrow and coming up on Saturday. But Mike hit it last time as far as betting on Memphis just last week. He was talking about, hey, if they can run the football, bet on this underdog team. So it's an interesting handicap, and the money is flowing in a really interesting way as well.
Well, the thing that I talked to my guys, and when we did a preseason special on Ole Miss, we talked about, would you rather be the team that was upset to not make the playoffs last year with something to prove, or would you rather be the Ole Miss team that people are slighting because of the losses of Jackson Dart and Walter Nolan and all of these NFL draft picks? And, the consensus was, let's be that team that maybe people don't think that this is our year. Yeah. And what have you seen over these first few weeks? It doesn't matter if it's ugly or pretty or dominant or not, or our starters hurt, who's this guy from Ferris State. Yep. Whatever the storylines are coming out of Oxford right now, they've been under the radar, but they're not anymore. Here comes the Bayou Bengals into the Vaught, a 2:30 game. Everyone's talking about this game on a weekend that has Georgia and Alabama and has Tennessee and unbeaten Mississippi State. There's some other games, but a lot of people are focused on this one because I think they want to see which team is legit.
Yep.
Which team, not just Ole Miss, which team is legit? Which team is going to be one of those 3 to 4 SEC teams that make the playoff?
Yep, no doubt.
Because I think there's questions on both sides of this. And Ole Miss had the team last year, didn't get it done at home. I don't think that Lane Kiffin's going to let that happen again. If this thing falls apart, it falls apart at Oklahoma or, some of these road games that are still. I don't think that Lane Kiffin is going to let his team, in an opportunity like this, have another one of those losses that at the end of the year you're like, we had.
How did this get?
Right. They were at home, we just didn't get it done.
No doubt.
That's how high I am on Ole Miss. And yeah, Simone, I'm going I'm going with Trinidad. I'm going to ride him.
Listen,
Unless Lane does what Lane does, and all of a sudden Austin Simmons starts the game on Saturday because he's good to go.
Just out of like pure arrogance of saying, you know what, I'm not going to let someone else break this news for me or whatever it was at McAfee and all that stuff that went down. But Mike Ceide, appreciate your time, sir. You've been fantastic. Thank you so much for 2 extended segments talking Lane Kiffin, Ole Miss. We will definitely have you on next week to recap whatever happens there at the Grove, at Oxford, and as we move forward into the SEC slate. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Y'all have a great day.